Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Aeon's End New Age dev stream, first one of the Kickstarter campaign. I am John, lead developer at Handelabra, and I am joined by David, who is developer at Handelabra. Say hello.
Hello.
David is a primarily engine developer, and so he's going to start off with some development of Magath. I'm actually just putting Magath up on the screen here first so we can talk about the Nemesis card before we jump into the programming stuff. But yeah, as a quick overview, I guess David's already done some prep on programming the engine part and is going to be implementing some of the Nemesis stuff with the Nemesis mat and the cards. And then we're going to bring that over and see how that comes into the user interface. Feel free to shout out if you're in the chat, say hello, and ask any questions if you like. So looking at Magath here, if you're familiar with Carapace Queen, Magath is kind of the evolution of Carapace Queen with flies and maggots instead of husks and some different effects related to that. Hello, Faye Leica, welcome. So this is the front page of Magath, and that it's got the reverse side with the setup. And Magath also comes with a Nemesis mat, a nest mat that has the different rows of where the flies and maggots go. And yeah, the back of that's the same. So without any further ado, I suppose, we can let David take over, and let me click the right things. David can take over and get into it. So I'll turn off my video too. Well, we can let you focus on what you're up to. Take it away.
Alrighty. We're going to start with what we call the definition of the Nemesis. And what this is this is a text, like a JSON representation of all the data that is just on the card that doesn't really go anywhere, doesn't really change. So we've got like the name, Magath. We use an identifier. In this case, they're the same, but like an identifier is just like the title, the name of it without any spaces so that we can easily refer to it. So, there's the max life, all this sort of text like what do they do when they unleash? What are their rules?
Yeah,
And
essentially
those.
everything printed on the card, right?
Mm-hmm. And going all the way down into the Nemesis deck, which we have a definition for each card in the deck. So Magath has 9 cards, and you can see them here. So here's like that identifier without spaces, Fly Throng. And then what you would actually see printed on the card with the space included. So we have which Nemesis this card belongs to, what tier it is for Aeon's End card, because the deck construction has those in a specific order, what type, and the various parts of these cards that you would see. Like Fly Throng has a bolded to discard listing on it, so that'll be shown here. Like this text will be shown in that section, and what actually happens when the power happens is shows this text here. And you'll probably get to see that card later during the UI segment, but you'll get to see it all come together. But this is how it starts.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the definition, and we load this information and create a model object called a card that we use to store the data that would change. So for example, if you look at a minion, which is a Nemesis card with health, like Vile Breeder here, we record its max life here, but its current life will change as you play the game. And so that model object will record what its current health is, as you damage it. And that model is the sort of thing that would go into a save game if you're like stopping in the middle. And so the next step up from that is what we're going to be working on. That is the controller. That is where all the behavior of the card lies, because the model just tracks what is true about it in the game state. The controller is, well, what does it do? So we're going to be looking at controller stuff today. So like for this vile breeder here, its controller would place a maggot into play when it's supposed to, and then cause some damage when it's supposed to. So let's start by looking at Magoth. So there's already a good amount here because Magoth is is reminiscent of Carapace Queen, which is a nemesis that we've already implemented. We have this list of what we call damage target controllers, which are basically little cardless minions, because flies and maggots, they don't have cards, but they do need to have model objects to track the damage. So these controllers track to damage target model objects. And so we have just a list here. Even though the mat has multiple rows and like what's in what row matters, you only really need to know, at least on the code side, that there is one just straight list. And we basically break it up with this little, this array here, nest mat row counts. So basically, the first row is 5, so you just look at the first 5. The second row is 4, so the end of that row is marked by 9, because 5 plus 4 is 9. So you would know everything between 5 and 9 is row 2. Same for the third row is 4, so 9 to 13. Fourth row is 13 to 17. And the final row is just 2, so it goes 17 to 19.
Yeah, and I guess part of that is because you can only attack the maggots and flies in the top row, right? So you can't like leave gaps.
Exactly. So this nice little helper, get nest mat top row, because allowed nemesis specific targets determines which targets you can attack. So let's look at how do we find what's in the top row. So get nest mat top row here. We create a list that we're going to be returning, and then we check what's in the nest mat. So if there's less than that first increment 5, we just return the list nest mat. If we are between 5 and 9, we skip the first 5 and then return the rest of them. And the same thing on and on and on. So 9 to 13, we skip 9. 13 to 17, we skip 13. And finally, if there's more than 17, we just skip 17 and return the rest. So that is how we determine what is in the top row. Because those are the ones that are important for the nest mat. They're the ones that are important for what you can damage. And the same is the top row filled. Checks. Is that row filled? So let's jump on up to adding them. So when you need to add a maggot or fly, code, like all these cards are probably going to do something like that. You're going to have to call this code. So you add maggot and fly, how many you're adding, whether or not they are maggots or flies. So because in this, maggots and flies don't really have a super amount of behavior associated with them, we have them abstracted out to just these nemesis targets. If it has 1 life, it's a maggot. If it has 2 life, it's a fly. Because that's really the only difference. Like if you deal 1 damage to a fly, it becomes a maggot. That's in the rules. Mm-hmm. So this is a very simplified version of that. So then we go loop through and add the number that we want. Never add more than the maximum that the nest mat can hold. So if there's more than 19, then you don't want to add it. Actually, let me
Guess
just
you
make
just
sure that's
lose.
right. Yeah.
In that case.
Yeah, you just lose in that case, so you don't want to go over that. But you call this add nemesis specific target. You tell it what you're adding. The max life is 2 because maggots can turn into flies and flies can turn into maggots. And then you pass it what its starting life is to tell it what it's supposed to be. Is it a maggot or a fly? So then after adding it, you check, is the top row filled? Because if it is, you're supposed to perform the code that it tells you to when that row is filled. So if you fill the first row, you're supposed Gravehold suffers 2 damage, and you're supposed to hatch a fly. So turn a maggot into a fly. So this is code that I have not yet finished because we're going to be working on this here. So let's get into it then. So I'm going to get rid of this. So Gravehold suffering 2 damage. So we use coroutines, which let us run these sort of code snippets in a structured sequence. So we are going to create a coroutine here. So the game controller is a controller for the whole game. It has all the little things you can do, like adding targets, like drawing cards, playing cards, casting spells, etc. So we're going to say, hey, game controller, we want Gravehold to suffer damage. So we're going to deal 2 damage to Gravehold. Deal damage. So the source is this, because Magoth is the source of the damage, saying, hey, you're taking 2 damage. That is the card with the text that is causing the damage. The damage source, sometimes the damage source could be different than the card that says to do something. Like if Magoth had a card that said each fly does 1 damage to a mage, then you would want to have the damage source for each of those be the fly that's doing it. In this case, we're just going to say that it is Magoth because there's no source here listed. So the damage amount is 2. And the target is Gravehold, which we have a reference for, the Gravehold controller. There's a couple other optional parameters that we can pass in if we need, like we can get the results of the damage in case we need to refer back to it. If there's like other damage actions related to this or casting breaches if this is from a spell. A lot of those exist because this is a game that can do many things, but this is pretty simple. So just Gravehold is taking 2 damage from Magoth. So that creates our coroutine that we're going to be calling. So in order to run a coroutine, we have this boilerplate code here, which lets us just run that code that we are setting up.
Yeah, and that lets the UI, show an animation or get a decision from the player at any point, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to do if you just called a function directly.
Yeah. So we're going to put that boilerplate code, and now this code right here, that's everything we need for Gravehold suffering 2 damage, because deal damage is a thing. It's very, very complicated because lots of things can happen. But whenever we want to deal damage, we just go through that. So now we need to hatch a fly. So we're going to need this boilerplate again. And we want to have another coroutine run. We can use the same E variable because E will have already been completed at this point. And we have a little coroutine here, hatch fly. It's not filled out yet, but that's what we want to do. So we're going to say hatch fly. And it's happy. this is what the code that'll run when we fill that first row. So let's go fill this out now. Find the bottommost maggot. So we want so because we just have a list, this nest mat, and we append things to the end of the list as they get added to go up the rows. That means that the bottommost maggot is going to be the first one. So we want to find nest mat where, so there's damage targets. We're going to check through each of these and find the ones that are maggots. So how do we determine what's a maggot? It has 1 life. That will get us all the maggots in the nest mat. We want to get the bottommost one, so we want the first one. So there we go. That'll find the one we want, if it's there. If we have one, oops. If we have one, we want to turn it into a fly. So in order to do that, we set its life to 2. So we have something in game controller for set life. Oop, that's set max life. So then we would want to use gain life because we don't want to change the max life. We know it has 1 right now, so we just gain life should do it.
Yeah, and the UI will need to know if it's a, normally if it's something gains life, we show like a little healing animation and stuff, but the UI will know that if it's a maggot or fly, then we'll do something a little different.
Mm-hmm. So we pass it, the bottommost maggot, and then we add that boilerplate so that we can do the coroutine. But this is not a coroutine, it's just a game action. So what game actions are and how they differ from coroutines. Basically, game actions are the things in a game that the rules could respond to. So like when if you had a mage that had a rule that says whenever you take damage, gain a charge, like Malistar, you would want him to be able to respond when he takes damage. So you would have to have a game action happen that says, I'm a deal damage action. So you could say, hey, when deal damage actions happen, do my thing. So they often use coroutines, but they are a different thing. So it is an action. And we are going to do action. So it's still complaining. Oh, it needs how much life it's gaining, of course. Just gaining 1, because we're going up to 2. So that will turn a maggot into a fly, 1 health to 2 health, or life. So now this code here will run. We can go ahead and make a little test to see if that works. So we can use a copy of this unleash test as our base. Since we're going to be doing a little bit of unleashing. Magoth test mat. We're putting 2 maggots into play whenever we unleash. So we start with 2. So if we unleash again, 6. Use this code again. But we also want to make sure that the code that we just wrote happens when we get that many. Because whenever we add one, this is supposed to be called. Or whenever we add one that fills a row, this is supposed to be called. All right, so we are going to be, Gravehold is going to take 2 damage. We know that. And it's going to add a fly. So really, 6 is not the number we want. 7 is. And 0 is not the number of flies. 1 is. And we want to be able to keep track of Gravehold's life. So we have a helper quick life storage. And we can track Gravehold's life. And then after this unleash, we call quick life check to see what the difference in the life should be. It should be 2. So let's go ahead and run that. Let's add to the comment. When filling the first row, 5, we should deal 2 damage to Gravehold and add 1. All right, so it's failing. So expected 7, but was 6.
Yeah, shouldn't there be still 6, just 1 flips over, right?
Oh, it's hatching a fly, not adding a fly. That is correct. So there should still only be 6, and 1 should turn into a fly, so there's 1 fewer. Hatch. Just did this.
That's why we have the tests.
Yeah. There we go. Now it's working the way we want it to. Alrighty, so that is the first one. So let's go look at the next one. Second row is the same thing. Gravehold suffers 2 damage, so we can just copy this. And then hatch 2 flies. So we probably want to add to hatch fly the number of flies to hatch. And then we can have it do a loop similarly. So if we go up here, we can add int number to hatch, and then we make it default to 1. So if you just call hatch fly, it does it. And then we can just put a looper on this. There we go. So now we're hatching 2 flies instead of 1. And the number is 9. So we have 6. So to test the next row, we're going to need to do this again, but more this time. Unleash twice. 1, 6. Filling the second row. Should deal 2 and hatch 2 flies. So we're going to now I want to check between just to make sure nothing's happening. So now we should have 10, 8, 2 of which are flies.
Or
Let's check.
3 flies?
Oh, yes, you're correct. 1 off again. There we go. 7 and 3. Working good so far. So third row, another similar one. So this time we're going to use the same code, but we're going to do 3 flies instead. Nice and easy this one is. So 9 goes to 13, so we're going to unleash twice more to get 14. Total 5 flies. I'm remembering this time. And 8. Whoops. It's not 8. I did my math wrong. I remembered, but did the wrong math. Wait. It is. Because we're doing 3 This is 6. 5 is wrong. Always something. This is why we test. There we go. Because there's 14 total. There were 3 flies. Now there are 6. And that means there are 8 maggots. Alrighty. So now we're going to do something a little bit different, but in some ways much simpler. Gravehold just takes 5 damage when the 4th row is filled. For that, we just need to change this number. Nice and easy. So now, so we need 17, so we're going to go for 18 total. Oops, 2nd row, 3rd row. 5 damage to Gravehold. So this time we're expecting 18. And 12 of them are maggots. So this should work.
Hey,
there we
first
go.
try.
Yeah, first try this time. No complicated math of adding or subtracting.
Hey, Wargasm Eternal, welcome.
So that seems like it's working. It just does 5 when we expect it to. And now the last one.
The worst
So
one.
The worst one. When this happens, the players lose the game. So we're going to have to tell the game controller, it's game over. Is the reason it is over. And did the players win? No, they lost. And you'll note that game over is an action because things might be able to say, well, wait, the game isn't actually over sometimes. They might want to respond to that. So this is not an enumerator. This is not a coroutine. This is an action. Yep. Alrighty. So now we're going to see if the game properly ends when we do this. Final row only lets us have 19. Game is lost. We don't need this anymore. We are expecting 19. We don't actually care much what kind they are. We just want to see, is the game over? And did we lose? And just for good measure, let's check before this. Did we not lose? Oh wait, we don't have a helper for that. So maybe we should assert game over. So we're going to go in here. Assert game controller is game over. So let's make one.
Oh, there's
of these.
right below it, assert not game
Oh,
over.
assert not game over. There we go. That's what we want.
A good thing to just be asserting in life.
Yep. There we go. Look at that. Working perfectly.
Nice.
So that is Maggoth working. So we know that all the adding of flies or in maggots, the hatching of flies is working. We know that the nest mat effects are working. So feel like Maggoth is in a good place. We can move on to the other cards now. So Fly Throng. So Fly Throng is that one, if you'll remember, that lets us spend 6 ether to discard the card, And if we don't, if it ticks down, 3 maggots go into play. Any player suffers 3 damage. So I have already translated that into comments here and already put in the boilerplate. So now let's get to it. So first we check, can you resolve the discard effect? Because we need to ask the player, hey, do you want to do this? They have to be able to spend 6 ether. So we want to return the mage resolving the effect. Do they have enough ether? And ether can be restricted for specific things. We want unrestricted. We want it to be more or equal to 6. So they have to have 6 ether to spend. So now we're actually going to reduce that ether. So adjust ether amount. This, because this is the code.
Is it not the spend ether, or is that a different helper?
Spend ether. Oh, spend ether right there. That is probably that. Aha. So spend ether calls adjust ether out. There it is. So spend ether has some code that makes sure that, hey, don't spend negative amounts. So the mage resolving the effect. The amount to spend 6, and ether types. So this is a list of the restrictions on the ether that we're allowed to spend. So let's make ether type. And let's say that this is discard power, because that's what we're doing. So it doesn't like that. Why doesn't it like that? Aha, because spend ether is a game action. There we go. Now it likes it. Alrighty. So now we have the code that'll give spend the ether to discard it, because this is a common effect. This will, lots of cards have this. And when we resolve that effect, it'll know, hey, do the code that we're supposed to, and then discard it. So now let's do the bad thing. Time to implement the stick. Place 3 maggots into play. So this is a Magoth Nemesis card. So we have the handy little helper here, Magoth, which will take the Nemesis controller and give us it cast properly so that we can access its fields. So in methods, so we want to do Magoth, and we want to add maggots or flies. I'm going to add 3. And our flies is false by default, so we only need to add 3. And this is the code that we saw earlier. So now, and we know that that works. So we don't need to, we already have tests in place for that. So now, players taking damage. So we want to deal damage. Oops, deal damage. Source is this card. Damage source is, I believe it is this card, because it's not saying that anything else is dealing the damage. Amount is 3. Any player. So this is asking for a target. So maybe deal damage isn't the right choice here. You want to select target and deal damage, so that we know to ask the UI, hey, who are we dealing this to? This can have multiple parameters. Damage amount, 3. Target criteria. So this is a function that takes in damage target controllers and says, is this one okay or is it not? So we only want players to take it, so we want them to be mages. So only mage damage targets. And this reason will help the UI know what message to display. So player to suffer damage. And there's some other things that we can pass into this as well. Other optional parameters that I don't think we need here. So 3 maggots get added, 3 damage is suffered. This is how you discard it. Let's write a test. So we don't have a card test already, so let's just use the very basic one. As we are expecting fly throw. There's two at the start. We want to go to the Nemesis turn, specifically the draw phase. So we want to make sure that it is Megoth. And we want to give it what card we want to draw. So we want it to draw Fly Throng. So that means first let's find Fly Throng. We know its name, its identifier, so we can just look it up. Hey, grab this card from the deck. This is what we're drawing. So we want it to be in play, certain Nemesis play area. And it comes into play with a number of power tokens that demonstrate how long, 3 of them. And that's how many turns it'll take to tick down. So we want to make sure that in the test we check that.
The question from Frenzied Havoc. How do you feel about magic numbers?
Magic numbers?
I don't think he's talking about Night Mist.
I mean, I thought that it was Night Mist. I'm not really sure what a magic number is in this case.
I think he's talking about number and string literals in code versus having constants and things.
I don't think that that's a terrible thing to do, but the nice thing about having constants is because, like, there's a single point you can change them at usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one thing we find with card games like this is since, like, a lot of those things are printed on the cards, like this card deals 3 damage, like there's not really any value to putting that in a constant. It's just always going to be that. So, and if it's only used in one spot, that's just what is this card doing. I think those kind of magic numbers feel okay to me.
Yeah, like it's nice to have single points to change things, and for the most part, for most of the time, the numbers are going to stay roughly the same. So,
yeah, I guess a good example is the nest mat counts variable you have there. Putting that into a variable instead of having those numbers spread throughout the code is easier to deal with, I think.
Mm-hmm. Like if there was another printing of Magoth and we wanted to update for that, we could just have that use the same thing but have the numbers change.
Mm-hmm.
So useful, single point of change. So anyway, we want to assert the power count. It only takes the Nemesis card controller, so let's make sure that this is a Nemesis card. Yep. And it's never not going to be that because Fly Throng is a Nemesis card. So let's see. Does it go into play and doesn't have the right number? It does. Okay. So now we're going to want that number to tick down. So we're going to go to next main for the Nemesis. That number will tick down to 2. And we're going to do that again, and the number will tick down to 1. We're going to do it again, and it will go to 0, and it will be discarded, so it's no longer in play. So certain Nemesis discard, Fly Throng. And now, so let's mark. So now Fly Throng is going to do its thing. So it is add 3 maggots and there's 3. That is correct. I'm going to double check. But 3 maggots, 3 damage. Awesome. Maggot test. Alrighty, so we can do that trick that we did with Gravehold, quick life storage, as long as we know who it's going to deal damage to. By default, we have Brahma and Aeon in here. So let's check Brahma and Aeon. And Gravehold while we're at it. Don't want this damage going to Gravehold by accident. So it'll be in the discard for quick life check. So by default, if you don't provide a choice, it'll pick the first choice. That's usually Brahma as the first mage. So let's make sure that this goes to Aeon so that it's, and not Gravehold. So we're going to say select next target. And we want to make sure that the number of maggots goes to Doesn't something else happen at 5? Oh yeah, Gravehold takes damage. So we are expecting Gravehold to actually take damage here, unless we can get rid of those other maggots.
Interactions.
Yeah, this is the fun thing about these tests, because lots of things happen, and you need to account for all of them. So let's actually, on one of these turns,
is that going to play cards on the Nemesis turns?
They are. Yep, they're going to play cards. So let's make sure that the minimum amount of stuff can happen. So let's go to a mage. Let's go to casting. So Aeon's going to cast a spell. Let's have it be a boosted spark. So we're going to open Aeon's 4 breach, so there's +1 damage. Spark is a basic spell, it does 1 damage. We're going to have it deal damage to the first maggot. And we're going to put it in the 4th breach. So there is an ability on Magath, which is implemented, where you can suffer damage to split your damage amongst the targetable maggots and flies.
You don't actually have to suffer damage to do that.
Oh, you don't?
Nope.
That's just Carapace Queen.
Yeah.
And I may have messed up when I put that in there. Nope, I did it right.
It's free, but you can only do it on the row.
Mm-hmm.
Not
so it should split damage.
Yeah.
No suffering damage here. So I did do it right. Yay me in the past. So we are going to be dealing 2 damage to one of them, and then we're going to split that among 2 of them so we can just get rid of it, get the number down to 0. Just to simplify stuff a little. Okay, so there's a null reference. Where is that happening? Oh. It's playing a card that isn't implemented. So now that we did expect that, actually, so that's not the end of the world, because it's making it past these places. So now let's give it some other cards to play that are less problematic. So we're going to say include some basic ones, which are already implemented. So include Nemesis cards. So classics are Banesire, Eye of Nothing. Banesire will cause an unleash, but we can, as we've shown, we can get rid of that pretty easily.
Put in Bleed Static, that doesn't do anything.
Oh yeah, Bleed Static. There we go.
And it has a long counter.
Bleed Static and I have nothing. 2 powers that should not trigger by the time that they come up. Grab those cards here. We'll do it here. Bleed equals find card controller. Bleed. Want a Nemesis card.
Oh, it needs to be go to next draw, I think.
Hmm?
It needs to be go to next draw, not go to next main.
Oh, yes, go to next draw. Correct. So this will take us through the main phase, which should still tick this down. So that is what we want. So we're going to copy this. Instead of going to next, we're going to go to... I have nothing. Alrighty. We're going to check this we're going to check the number of maggots and flies at every step just to make sure that nothing funky is going on. So now, just 3. Now this should happen exactly as we expect. We select Aeon for the damage, and we add 3 maggots. Okay, so it didn't quite work the way we wanted. Why is that happening? So there's a little nuance here. When you just say go to next draw, sometimes it gets confused, and it's like, well, we're already here. So let's enter next state. All right, never change this number back. So it's saying, what? There are only 3. We don't need this comment, actually, because we already know what's going on. There we go. 3 maggots, 3 damage. Card works. Yay, Flythrong.
Cool.
Alrighty, so we probably have time for at least one more, so let's move on to Hive Surge. Well, let's actually jump up to a minion. So, Vile Breeder. Place a maggot into play, suffer 2 damage, then it calls the base persistent effect. This is just a little thing that we use to keep track of, hey, have I been activated this turn? So, you already know how this goes. And all these cards are mercifully simple in this way. Add stuff, do damage.
Yeah, does Magath have any like complicated powers or anything?
No, actually. They're all like very, very simple. Like I can actually show, like this is the most complicated one, I think. So if there's a certain number, add flies, otherwise damage and discard a spell. So I can actually show all of these real quick because they're all
Right.
very simple.
Or yeah, and they all do things that we have already done before, primarily with like.
Mm-hmm. This one's a decision, but it is still
Right.
simple. Flies and damage, flies and damage. It's all flies and damage. So let's do Vile Breeder. The damage source is this card. It's dealing 2 damage, and we only want it to go to mages. And the reason is because we want them to suffer. So this is going to be very similar to the beginning of the Flythrong test, but we don't actually need that many Nemesis cards because we only really need to go once instead. Just to do the persistent effect that we want to test. So let's get rid of I have nothing. And we don't need to include these Nemesis cards because Magath always includes their unique stuff. These are only for the generics, which are random. Alrighty. bread. So we want to draw that card. We want to make sure Vile Breeder is in there. It doesn't have a power count. It has life, so we want to assert that it has the proper amount. If we look at its definition, it has 9. So we want to make sure it has 9. And that is all we need to check for it right now. Get rid of all this stuff at the end here. Don't need to get rid of don't need to, well, actually we still. All right, so we're going to the next turn. Bleed static, go to the next draw. Oh, we gotta enter the next turn phase. So, or to enter the next state. So now, its persistent code will run. Because persistent happens during the main phase, so it's going to place a maggot into play. It's going to suffer, and then people are going to suffer 2 damage. So let's check that. Oh, actually, we don't even need this. We don't even need this.
Yeah, you just need the main phase, right?
Yep, go to the next main phase. Goodbye, Bleed Static. We don't need you. And so now, instead of there being 2, there should be 3. And we do want them to all be maggots, so we can check that. Check that in a second. So let's add a quick life check. Aeon, Gravehold. Life check. So this time, let's let Brahma take the damage. So Brahma should take 2. There should be a third. And we want to check the number of maggots and flies. So we should have 3 and 0 flies. Flies are bad. We don't want any. Look at that. Beautiful.
Nicely done.
So I think that is all we really have time for. We could try to start a third one, or just take some questions. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I don't know that the other ones are as too different, unless you wanted to show some of the different 2 discards or something. But we could open it up if anyone has any questions while you take a look at that. If anyone has any questions for David about the engine stuff.
Yeah, not too much to look at.
Certainly more complicated stuff coming up in New Age with the other nemesis and mages, but we thought this would be a good starting point.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the most basic nemesis in the box, I think.
Yeah.
By a significant margin. This is like the Rageborn of New Age. Although Rageborn is deceptively difficult, I would say. Very simple, but simple does not mean easy.
Yeah, there's a lot of damage flying around with Rageborn that can overwhelm you. Frenzy asks, how does the UI respond to the coroutines? Could we see the code, for example, when adding a maggot? Yep, we're going to be going into the UI part just next. So you will be seeing that. And I guess I need to make sure that you commit and push up your code, or I won't get to see it.
That's true. I will do that now. Just making sure I didn't make any typos. This all looks good to me. And I always got to run the tests, all of them, just in case I broke something, even though they all should be green. All good.
Only 339 tests in Aeon's End. Sentinels has more than 2,000, I think.
Yeah. And then some of them are like really long, like guys tests.
Yeah. Yeah, and we also have a continuous integration server that will automatically run the tests. So even if we forget to run the tests, it will get run and email us if we broke things. So that's handy. Frenzy asks, who is the Aeon's End fan and who decides what games to work on next?
I mean, I like Eon's End. I play it, so I am a fan, I guess.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I think most people at Handelabra enjoy Aeon's End. And
I think I might be the only one who just plays on nothing but Extinction, though.
Yeah, I don't really play on Extinction level.
So yeah.
That's hardcore. Oh
What
yeah,
can I say? I like my games hard.
Did you implement the increased difficulty on Magath?
Yeah, actually I did. It's very, very easy. Surprise, surprise. Increased difficulty is adding a fly and a maggot instead of 2 maggots.
Okay.
So the order matters. So the fly goes first and then the maggot. But other than that, it's almost exactly the same.
Cool. And as for who decides for what games to work on next, that's me and Jeremy, mainly. And we, of course, work with our partners on deciding, what features and expansions and things are next. So, obviously, related is the decision to go to New Age before War Eternal and Legacy is something we decided with indie boards and cards as a decision that seemed to make the most sense for the digital version. So, but once we fingers crossed, succeed with the Kickstarter campaign and make the New Age, we would love to go in and fill in the back catalog of War Eternal and Legacy in the future too. Have you played Aeon's End Legacy, David?
No, I haven't. I follow the story because I like the characters, but I have not played Legacy. I have had it explained to me though, so no surprises.
Yeah, I want to play it too. I should get a copy, play through it. I played the New Age Expedition and really enjoyed that. So, awesome. Okay, so now it is going to be time for the UI. So, thanks very much, David, for getting that engine programming in and showing that off. And
happy to share with all you guys.
We will let you head off to grab some lunch because David is in a time zone where he needs lunch.
Most people do, but I need mine now.
Yeah. And it's been great to have you on. And I will be continuing on to the UI. So we'll talk to you later, David.
Yep. See y'all.
All right. So let's go to, this display capture. I'll bring my camera back and we will go on with the UI part. All right, so feel free to continue asking questions and stuff. I will try to keep an eye on the Twitch chat on my second screen here. So I'm just going to I have a script that will automatically pull down the engine changes and update that. And so that is there. And yeah, so in the UI, what we're going to do is I have a little checklist. What we typically do is program everything in the engine first, and then go into the UI and basically play the game with that content, make sure it all works, make sure it looks right, and anything, add any integrations that we need to and stuff like that. And then anything that doesn't work, we cycle back and iterate and make any changes in the engine to support that, and so on. So it's a back and forth process between different areas, but it works pretty well. So the first thing we can do is just see if the card pulls up. So we have a scene here to pull up any card we want in the game by just putting in its identifier. So here, for example, Nightbot is complaining about the Kickstarter link, but I will post it manually. Check out the New Age Kickstarter. So this is a minion card, not the one, but I think what was the other one that we were looking at? Vile Breeder. And Jennifer put in the art file for this so that we could capture it for the Kickstarter post. So you'll notice there's the big card is looking pretty good. So one thing I'll do is I'll pull this up. I'll make sure that all the information here is correct, and I'll actually pull up the print file. We have a print file of all the cards in the game, and I'll compare this and see, is our information correct based on the printed card? And if it's not, then we can go back and fix it up. Another element in the digital version that's not in the physical is the small card. And you can see it looks kind of weird. It's got the artwork there, but the text doesn't have any icons. And that's because we haven't made a maggot icon yet. And so it's trying to show a maggot icon, but we don't have one. So that is something that we've put in here in the engine, but it's not there in the UI yet. So we usually have a separate list here for new icons we need to create. So fly and maggot. We're going to need to create icons for those. But I'm not worried about that right now. That's something we'll add in, and then that'll automatically show up properly. So we can also take a look and see if the Nemesis mat is showing up. So we don't have the art file in there, so that's just black. But we can see the text, and we can compare that against the print file. So I'm not necessarily going to go through all of this right now, but you can see the front side and the back side. Sometimes we actually had to make an adjustment to the text here for Horde Crone, who has a very long amount of text on the back. But yeah, so this is a setup we use this card testing scene to really quickly iterate on these cards and make sure that they look right and make any adjustments. Actually have another scene that you might be interested in, which is a grid tester that will just basically load every card in the game at once. And this might not work because of something. Yeah, maybe something's broken here. But the idea is it loads all the cards, but something is wrong. So I'm not sure what it's trying to do. All right, so let's basically get into trying Magath in the game and seeing what works and what doesn't and integrating those things. So the very basic thing is just to start a game. And so we have a handy asset here in Unity that we can create a game setup for testing and have it start the same game really quickly. So I can choose Magath here, have any 1 to 4 mages, choose whatever player cards I want, choose the turn order, and various other things. Like I don't want to discard any Nemesis cards. Do I want charges, prep spells, hand cards, all kinds of different things that we can set up the game to quickly test stuff. So you'll see we'll get to some of this other stuff in a bit when we're looking at specific cards. Hey, you're jealous of the print files? Yeah. They send them to the printer and they send them to us because we need to make everything. And we get all the original art files So Jennifer can take those and use the layers to make cool effects and stuff. So yeah, that's a fun part of the process. So we have Magoth here, and so there's no art in the game yet. That's something next week. Jennifer's going to be showing getting the artwork for the Nemesis in. Also, oh, and I've got Gygar here, but he also doesn't have any art. So maybe let's instead of Gygar, let's pick Kidir. Just so we see something on the screen, I guess. So we can still right-click on here and see the mat, even though there's no graphics. And you see there's no display of maggots or flies because those are things that are special for each nemesis, has their own special thing. So every nemesis has their mat and their deck and their play area and their discard, but the special things that every nemesis does isn't something that is generic, right? So obviously it's special. So if we change this to like Carapace Queen, who is kind of the closest thing to Magoth, there is, the husk track, and there's sort of two aspects to that. There's the gameplay stuff. So the husk track, you can pull up the full husk track or have the summary here that shows you what the effect is and how many husks, and you can target them with spells, interact with them, and all that. There's that, and then there's also the like extra sort of visual flair stuff. So with the Carapace Queen, the interactive stuff is here, and the gameplay stuff is here, and then there's the bonus stuff is these little husks that hover around they crawl around the edge of the screen, and you can try to swat them away with your mouse, but they come back somewhere else. Or another example is Prince of Gluttons. For Prince of Glutton's special thing, there's the devoured pile is, the special mechanical area, but whenever the prince devours cards, he gets bigger, and if you buy cards from this pile, he gets smaller. So that's kind of the interesting thing, and then there's that extra little chomping effect that happens as well. So every nemesis has their own mechanical, but also visual things. So what we're going to focus on today is probably more the mechanical thing versus the bonus visual things. So let's go and take a look at that. So we definitely need to be able to see the nest mat in some form and the maggots in some form. So in the log here, I'm sure we're seeing in here something about the start of the game creating those initial maggots. Well, I don't see them, but that doesn't mean they're not there, because I think the very start of the game is 2 maggots go into play. Excuse me. So let's at least create that special area. So how we do that, we don't want that to be always being loaded no matter what nemesis you're doing. So we actually have, for every nemesis has a special area. So you can see we have a prefab here in the resources section for every nemesis. And I'm just going to we have a template one that is essentially just blank. It has like, here's where maybe the special deck is and discard and tokens. But since this is very similar to Carapace Queen, I'm going to just duplicate Carapace Queen's and go from there, I think. Because Carapace Queen's has the husk track and things like that. So I think we're going to copy that. We're not going to like descend. We're not going to like have a prefab hierarchy or anything, but just take that as a starting point. I think makes sense here. Well, thank you for the compliment. It's always great to get good feedback. One of the things we definitely try to focus on whenever we design a UI is making sure you have access to all the information you need without it being overwhelming. And that can be difficult with games like this where there's a lot going on. But it's a balance we try to work on all the time. So, all right. So I'm going to change this to be a fixed aspect as well, because we always want, when we design our UIs, we try to keep basically between 4:3 and 16:9 are sort of the aspect ratio that we work within. 16:9 is by far the most common computer PC aspect ratio, but 4:3 is iPad, and so it's also very popular. And so we need to make sure that we're not designing stuff that only works in 16:9 then doesn't work in 4:3, and kind of vice versa. But obviously 4:3 sort of fits within 16:9. So we create this special area for Magoth, and actually there is a class as well. So I want to make this special subclass as well. So let's do that. I think it's under, turn taker views. So usually make a little folder because there's going to be like, a view for the husks and whatever. So, and we'll make a new class called Magoth special view, and get that set up. And there's a parent class for that handles most of what goes on, but anything specific to that nemesis goes in their class. So let's just grab Carapace Queen as the example. So we need to have the namespace. And we need a subclass. Oh. And so we have this configure method that we can update. I'm just going to take a look at the base class. Does it have... handles the deck tokens, but it doesn't handle nemesis targets, I don't think, specifically. Where Carapace Queen has like the husk panel and the husk summary. I think we'll probably do something similar to that. So we're going to mostly crib from that, I think, when we're looking at this. And the husk views, this is the actual targets. There's also husk images, which are just the display. So let's just set this up with just the main full panel before we add the summary panel too. So let's grab this here. Just see if I just want to be able to, display what's going on as a really initial thing. Maybe we just we have this board text label, board title label. These are something that we can use. The get swarm text has to be like, what is the thing that's going to happen when you swarm. We don't have swarming really. So let's just do this first, and we should see things appearing on the screen. That's the initial thing, right? And let's just do this. We'll get rid of this stuff. So I just want to see what's the total number of maggots and flies showing up on the screen. That'll at least give us some information showing up. And so let's go back to the game. And right, I made that subclass. We need to go to resources. All right, so I'm just going to remove this component and replace it with the Magoth special view. Yeah, and so you can see this label here is the stuff used for Carapace Queen. We can just sort of borrow this. It's going to be probably pretty similar. So nest mat. And we don't really have a swarm effect, right? It's kind of a row effect. We're not populating that right now. We have, right now we have a husk token image there. Let's just call this account label for now. And let's just attach that label over to the board text label. All right. And if we run this, we should actually see. Yeah, so it says 0, but that's actually good. It was 99, right? It actually set it to 0. We're not seeing 2, but that's because this hasn't been told how to update that label yet. So that's going to be the next thing. I actually have to take a little quick break. I will be right back. So I'm just going to put up the BRB, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So we don't need headphones anymore if David's not on. All right, back to it. So yeah, we're showing when we start what the number is, but we're not getting the update for when there's a new thing. And actually, we can go back and look at, Carapace Queen again and see what happens there. So basically, these special views are always can be called by the rest of the UI whenever anything happens in the game. And so what this is going to do is indicate that it's going to do that and then handle that. So yeah, so basically whenever we do a game action, we want to respond to that. So let's add this. And you can see what we're, in the Carapace Queen, we're updating the target counts whenever there's an add nemesis-specific target or remove nemesis-specific target. So let's take a look at what we want to do. I think we want to probably have a helper method here that like just updates that text. Because like thinking about it, like what do we want to see? What do we care about seeing on the mat here, right? The total number actually doesn't really matter as much as it does with Carapace Queen. I mean, it does matter because that, but you also care about like what things are flies and what things are maggots. I think just maybe for today, when we're not doing anything visual, really, it's more like functionality-wise. We're just going to update that label to say how many maggots there are, how many flies there are, just for maybe this initial bit. So I'm going to add a new method here, which is just like update summary label. And this code can go into here, and we'll just call it and I think we have, property nemesis view. And actually, we have two kinds of things, right? So we have this. Let's get our targets, and we have maggots. I don't know if there's any, is there any help from the engine about this? Has Maggoth Nemesis controller? I'm not sure if we have helper methods for like get me the flies, get me the maggots. That might be something we want potentially. Then the UI doesn't need to necessarily know too much about it. Sorry, kind of a little runny nose here. Let's we'll put a pin in that, and we'll just do the logic here for now. And we need link. And the flies are the ones where their life is 2. And then we can just say maggots and flies like this. This is not obviously going to be final, but just something we can use. So then we can just call this directly anytime. And this other stuff, we'll get to that. So whenever we're adding a nemesis-specific target, we'll update that label. If we're removing a target, we'll update that label. And then there's going to be other cases, but this should at least update it in this case here, we should see it show 2 maggots. Yep, so it initially showed 0, 0, and then it changed to 2, 0 from the start of the game. And if we do something like prep a spark and hit one of them, well, we don't have a way to hit one yet, do we? When we have the Nemesis play a card. Or have Banesire be in play so it'll unleash, right? Banesire, handy card. If we have the Nemesis have Banesire in play, we'll get an Unleash, which makes more maggots, and a Fly Throng appeared. But yeah, so we see that that effect is happening. Yeah, and I wonder if we can, if we put an attack on top, we could make it unleash again, right? I think Nemesis card list. What's an attack that just unleashes? Unleash twice. Slaughter, sure. So this is gonna have a bunch of stuff happen. 2 unleashes and some more damage. The first unleash is there. This is gonna trigger the nest mat ticking over. Right, so now we have 5 flies, or 5 maggots and 1 fly. And Gravehole took the 2 damage from the nest mat and the 1 damage from, or 3 damage from Slaughter. So that all is showing up correctly. Obviously, it's not really showing anything interesting here, but we're getting the right information through. That's the important thing for what I'm looking for at this early stage. So, yeah, so we got that summary information. I think I'm not really sure what I want the summary to show yet, but it's obviously clear that we want to show the nest mat in this way, similar to Carapace Queen. So with Carapace Queen, let's go back to a mage turn here and pull up the view in a game. You know, the full Husk track is basically just like the Husk track. You know, we can see a little bigger. It has all the information. It has the husks and everything like that. And so we can get this mat on the screen as well. Probably not showing up all the time because that's why we have the summary there. So you don't have to show the Husk track all the time. But you have access to it whenever you want. And similarly, we'll do that. But so I think getting that display there is a good step here too. So we're not gonna have the graphic, but we'll get it's basically a grid, right, and so on. So and it's very similar to Carapace Queen's setup where there's different rows that have different numbers of columns, basically, right? So let's set that up. So we need to go back into our Magath special area prefab here. And this is kind of looks funny because of the way this canvas gets set up in the prefab editor, but essentially we can look at it like this. And let's call this the nest mat. And the background, it's gonna have a background, but I'm just gonna make it a flat color for now. Jennifer will get the graphic for that. So with Carapace Queen, we have the swarm effect. Just thinking of the layout of this, if we want to try to have the text. So let's pull up Carapace Queen's mat and see how we converted that, because Obviously, we could start from scratch instead of looking at Carapace Queen, but we've already done this once, and so let's give a look at how we converted it before. So here we want to look at the Nemesis mat front. Yeah, so this is the original Husk track, and this is our version. So we still have, it's basically the same thing, right? Where we have the information on the left and then the grid. Whereas with Magoth, we have the information in between each row, which I'm not sure how readable that would be. In this space, it might be okay. Or we have the same number of rows, 5 rows. So yeah, I'm not totally sure. Let's just turn that off for now, and look at this and lay it out. So yeah, these are all using this Husk cell prefab. We're going to want to make a new cell type for our new thing, but we can make the grid be, yeah, actually, yeah, it's just a grid. It's a straight grid that has empty spots. So I think we just do the same kind of thing where we have instead 5 columns. And yeah, maybe the columns, I guess, yeah, I'm trying to think if we want to, if we do a grid, then we can't have, it's harder to have these bits in the middle. We can still do it. You have to like do a spacing thing. It might work out to make it look the same way because it is row based as well. So let's make our little cell. We'll just copy this and change it into, oh right, we need to make a folder for Magoth. We'll call it a maggot fly cell, and we're gonna have a new view as well. Because these are gonna sort of switch, right? Unlike husks don't have this sort of switching between maggot and fly thing that these are gonna do, so it's kind of a new thing. Maggot fly view. We'll set up our namespace. And yeah, I'm just curious about on the track panels here. Yeah, it's just, those are always there on the screen. They're just like, they're always there in the prefab of Carapace Queen, and then they're just like enabled and disabled to preserve the layout. And I think we can do the same thing here. I think that's all right. And then this is about the images around the edge of the screen. So yeah, we can do something basically like that. And so the Husk view is a base view, so we'll descend from that as well. Right, so it has actually, yeah, that's interesting. So it's got the empty side and the target side. So if there's nothing there, it's just blank, and if there is something there, so we can actually potentially have this hexagon as the empty part. So actually, and yeah, we've got. I think we do the same thing, like pretty similar, but it's going to be different enough that I don't think they're the same class or anything like that, right? Because of what we're doing here, there's basically, yeah. Let me have an image. And we have a maggot sprite and a fly sprite. And basically, the sprite is going to be either maggot sprite or that based on the life. Yeah, so pretty similar to the Husk view, actually. So we could maybe make a, damage target view or something like that these both descend from. Frenzied Havoc asks about what does the namespace do or how to use it. So yeah, namespaces are essentially just organizing your code into categories so you can avoid collisions. So it's not obviously makes a lot of sense for things like this, like that have very specific names, but you could imagine, say, this class called debug settings. If I want my own class called debug settings, and I'm not using namespaces, if anyone else named their class debug settings in any other library that I use, it's going to conflict, and I'm going to have to work around that. So by using namespaces, you can prevent conflicts between class names and other things like that. That's kind of the main purpose of having namespaces, is avoiding those collisions. So I can have, a class named button, right? There's a Unity class named button that's in Unity engine namespace, but I can have my own and it's okay because they're in different namespaces. So if you didn't have namespaces, everyone's names would all be in one pile, and you'd end up with a lot of problems with that. Yeah, so that's basically what it's about. And the sort of custom is to do sort of a reverse DNS almost thing, where in Java you actually use it would be com.handelabra. Whatever, because they really lean into the DNS part of it. But basically we format our stuff like Handelabra dot whatever the game is, in this case Aeon's End, or maybe it's Spirit Island or Sentinels, and then whatever sort of main section of the thing, so the view or the engine or the model. I never use anything more than this in the UI, but in the engine we separate the controller and the model out a little more for good reasons there. So all right, so yeah, I mean, looking at these, this should be a subclass. So let's do that, because this is the first, in Horde Crone. Horde Crone has trogs, but the trogs are actually cards, right? So they're not these special token versions of damage targets, and so they're actually just little card views that have a small card view. So they don't work exactly the same way as this, but I think having a damage target view makes sense. And I don't think we have, well, we do have a class called damage target view, don't we? Oh, right, because it's used by the Husk view. It's used by this. So honestly, then maybe it's not a big deal. This is a very small amount of copying. Most of the logic is in this damage target view that they're both using. So we could make like a Nemesis specific view or something like that, but it's honestly very specific to what these Nemesis are doing. So let's just go with this, and maybe I'll tweak it later. But this class is going to have some animations and stuff like that too. So so back to Maga Special View. Similar to Carapace Queen, we're going to have our array of not husk views, but maggot fly views. And we're going to update them basically in the same way. Very similar, but it's going to be a little different. And I think that's... Where do we update the full list? Update track panels. Oh, I see. So update track panels is called from the main class here, which is used for... There's various Nemesis have tracks, right? And so we're sort of considering this as a track view, so as well. So we're just going to sort of do the same thing as Carapace Queen does there to update the track panels. So yeah, so for each maggot fly view, we're going to update it. And let's get rid of this for now. So yeah, let's just make the maggot fly views. And then there's a hack here, which I think this is still a problem. So let's get back and update our little cell here. So I don't want that script. I want our maggot fly view. We have our empty, and we have our target. But in addition, so we've got this husk token. We don't want. We don't have these images yet. So maybe I'll just put something else in. Is there something else? A check mark and an arrow? Sure. So the image that we're going to update is this. And if it's a maggot, it's a check mark. And if it's a fly, it's an arrow. Temporarily. And then where's our... I guess there's a way to like favorite things in Unity, but I never find out how to do that. Maybe there's a way to do it that I don't know. Like pin stuff or something like that. Resources that I'm working on. I just scroll around a lot or search. I'm sure there's always improvements. So instead of these husk cells, I want maggot fly cells. And yeah, so let's make this wider. Oh yeah, we want that little like, the empty one should be this thing. So maybe we can update this again and make the empty image be... Oh yeah, I guess it's kind of like that. Let's just make it like really obviously yellow or something like that. We'll make it the hexagon or something like that. I'm just going to turn that off so I only see that for now. And right. So I'm going to get rid of all the husks and we'll put in our things. And actually, we're starting from the bottom with Magoth. So start at the lower left. Is that going to put them like way down there? It might. Oh no, it is up. I can never understand. Lower left, lower left. So there's the first, and we want 5. And that one's 0. Say, and then we don't have an empty, and we have an empty spot, right? And then 4 of them. And then an empty spot and 4 of them. And again. And then just 2. Oh, but more spacers this time. Because that's how they like to show them. And we can match that. So that looks correct, right? That stack. And what we can do is say our spacing is like 10 or 15 in the middle. So we have room for those labels that we can add in after. And yeah, and so then we need to say we have 19 maggot fly views, and here they are. So you can, yeah. Actually, what I can do is lock the inspector. There's a trick you can do. Instead of dragging one by one into this array, you can lock that and then select all of these and drop them in just the right spot, and they all go in. So if Magoth had like some sort of dynamic nest mat or whatever, then this isn't how we would do it. We would, instantiate these things at the right moment or whatever. But again, since this is a printed thing and this is how it is and it doesn't change, it's okay to do it this way. Since it's a fixed kind of situation. All right, so now it should actually populate that for us, and I actually go back and make sure that, yeah, that's visible, and let's see what happens when we pull it up. Oh, we're still on Carapace Queen. Nope. Here, Magoth. All right, so I think we might not be calling the right. Yeah, we're not updating this. Obviously, the spacing is wrong, but we want to update it too. I think on Carapace Queen Special View, it's updating the tracks here. Yeah. So Magoth also wants to update those. Update the track panel in that situation. All right, we got 2 check marks with health. That is excellent. I mean, doesn't look great, but it is what we want. So now we can look at getting this layout to fit. So you can see part of the problem is adding that space between the squares makes it taller, but we could just make the squares a little smaller. So what we can do is play with this live in the game, I think, and that can help figure it out instead of going back and forth. So here, why is our grid? What's the gray background? Oh, right. Okay. So I just want to change this just to know exactly what we're doing. Where's the information that we're showing? Because right now, this is the amount of space we're taking up with the actual grid. I think, yeah, we don't, if we're doing this, the text in between, we don't need to be dealing with stuff so far across like that, right? So the grid can actually start like that, and this can be, exactly as wide as it needs to be, even like, well, 230, 225. And that's probably enough space for the text. So that we need to get these down low enough that we can have a bit of text above as well. So to do that, we're going to need these cells to be a little smaller. Even like 30 by 30. 30 by 30 should do it. Then, of course, we don't need so much. And actually, if it's 30 by 30, maybe we don't need as much space here, right? Maybe that 12 is fine, and then we can go up to like 32 by 32. And then we don't need as much space horizontally either. The question is this getting to a point where this is too small? I mean, as long as they're at the size you can touch them and see them. I feel like we want to use this space more, so I kind of want things to be a little bit bigger here. Let's see what we can get away with. I mean, there's going to be some spacing of the image and stuff, right? So we'll still have to tweak some stuff a little more. But let's see what we can feasibly do here, like 35. And go a little further. I feel like that's probably gonna work. And because we still need a bit of text above that, right? So maybe it's like 34, 35. All right, let's go with that. So I need to take some notes to it so I get the information right. So the grid is 34 by 34, 12 spacing. The background is whatever, that's just an image. The nest mat 190 width, 10 and 20. Yeah. Okay. That should probably work, and then we can look at figuring out the summary area. There's still some more we need to do here too, but let's update that stuff. Just so we have the layout in a reasonable fashion. And we can add the text as well. So yeah, this I want to be at 0 as well. We were talking about a 34 by 34 grid, a little less spacing. And this is 190. So we'll go with that for now. And there'll be some tweaks around everything to make it look right. So let's add in those labels to that. So that is going to be this. And so on Carapace Queen had this other separate grid with these text things. And actually, what I was thinking of doing is using this text grid and just having it overlay on the same space. I think that might work, actually. So just have these come in here. And go from there. Gravehold suffers 2 damage, hatch 1 fly. I think I can't get that text. I can get it from the engine. I think. Actually, no, it's in the JSON file. Let's just grab that. Right? Nemesis Magoth. Oh, hatch 1 flies. And yeah, so this grid, we want to basically match that grid. Make the cells go all the way across. Is it? Or basically make the cells be 1 per row, right? So 36 high. And make the label be top adjusted. This is a prefab too, isn't it? Yeah, we should make that a prefab. Nest row label. And then we just like apply it to all of them. See, it's actually, I don't know that that's the right font. We want this to be wider across. How wide is this? 190. And yeah, these are like right aligned. Right top aligned. And then we can just make some adjustments to the grid to make everything fit right. I think. Yeah, this has padding too that I don't necessarily want, do I? Is that 38 size? Why doesn't that add up? I guess I just change it, increase it to whatever it needs to be, and then things will line up. Oh, because there's spacing on this. Right. That's why. So basically like that. Now they all go in the right space. Then we just change these ones. This just says Gravehold suffers 5 damage. And this one just says the players lose the game. And yeah, the text is not matching up in terms of size of things right now, but if we do that, I think we make the font a little smaller. I think these come down 1 pixel. Oh, doesn't quite do what I want. Is that because this has spacing and that doesn't? Yeah, I think that's why. So if I use some spacing here, will that do what I want? No. It's pretty close. We might need to make some tweaks. Just pad that over like that. I guess. That looks pretty good. The text is definitely too big, but we want it to be readable, so it's not like it's too big. You can still see it. So let's see how that looks in game. Yeah, not bad. I think it's good enough for today, probably. I can make this background extend up a little higher. Having it come off the top. All right, so we've got this track displaying. Obviously, we don't have the summary one right now, but I'm focused more on the main track. So one thing that's not going to show up right now is the hatching and stuff like that. And also, I don't know that we're actually setting up the damage target views properly, are we? Like if I prep a spark, can I actually hit one of them? Oh, actually I can. They're highlighting. So that worked. Okay. It had some Z order issue going on there, but that's, I think, something else that has to do with I think the Carapace Queen has a workaround for that. Yeah. Want to be in front unless anything is being dragged, which is what was happening there. And so we need to have a canvas. Yeah, I think we're still going to do a summary panel. Like this. Hook that up. So basically, if something's being dragged, it won't be over what's being dragged. Cool. So yeah, so that I think is covering. We can Just make sure that works. Actually, I need to hook up that thing, don't I? We're gonna get all unassigned references. Megoth. Hook up these references. All right, so now I can drag properly to one of these. So yeah, I think I still want that summary version so we can have a bigger text and whatnot, but deciding exactly how it shows that, maybe it's like how many flies and maggots are in that row or something like that, might be a way to go about it. What I do want to also show now is like, it's not going to know, right now we're only tracking when targets are being added and removed, but not when they're changing, right? When they're gaining life or losing life, we want to have it show the difference. And I think we need something that hatches a fly to do that. Right, which I guess is the row effect does that. So let's go and restore just our Nemesis turn, right? The Nemesis turn does that because of Bane's Ire and Slaughter, right? So we unleash, gets us 2 more. We unleash, gets us 2 more. Oh, and it did. We did get it to show that. I don't know what made that change, but it did change. And if I hit it, yeah, if we hit it, it didn't show anything. Right? It did deal the damage. Couldn't find damage target view. See, I think we need to be looking at the deal damage action as well. And if it's Nemesis specific target. And maybe I'll just, since all of these are doing basically the same thing, we'll probably have some, it might be still worth having these separate things because of potentially different animations and stuff. But we don't need to duplicate all that logic. And there's also the gain life action. That's what I was looking for before, and it didn't seem to need it, but it should need it. So let's see if this gets us to where we want. Yeah, and I think when a fly hatches, oh, I keep opening messages. I want to open preview. Flip the bottommost maggot over to the fly side, right? So if I attack this, hey, it downgraded, so cool. And if I attack this, it disappears and moves that one. But I actually can't, I shouldn't be allowed to attack those ones, actually. That's a bug. It's allowing me to target those. So that's a problem. I don't know if that's something that the UI needs to be checking. Because we do already, we do things is target allowed. We call is target allowed. And that's returning yes. So that needs to be fixed, I think. So I'll just make a note on this. True. But on lower rows than the top row. So we shouldn't be allowed to do that. But it is helpful for me to be able to do that at the moment. So right now we're just literally changing that image, but we'll probably, like on the tabletop, you have the little tokens that change, right? So we'll have some sort of either flip animation or animation between the two states instead of just like an image swap, most likely. And they certainly won't be check marks and arrows. But for now, that'll do. All right, so I think that's a good spot to commit what we've got. Let's take a look. So, did we change Husk Cell? I feel like, I guess it's like changing stuff that we didn't actually change, but I'm just going to discard the changes there because I don't think we meant to change anything. Let's just note that we updated the DLL. And yeah, initial work on Magoth special area and nest mat display. So I think what we got was, basic implementation of the nest mat and the maggots / flies. We need sprites for maggot / fly, visual polish for nest mat, animations for nest mat changes. So those are good enough, I think, to check off in terms of functionality there. We need to add the summary display of nest mat. So yeah, what I'm thinking probably for the summary display is potentially just like the top row or something like that, or I don't know, maybe it's a total number. It's weird because there's like maggots and flies and they're important to know what's the situation on the nest mat potentially. So it's a little more complicated than the Carapace Queen situation. So I'll have to think about that. Maybe it's like some display of the top row, I think. Maybe makes sense. Top row display. But yeah, we'll think about that one. The unleash is working pretty clearly. Did anything else come up here? The damage splitting, I think. Yeah, this 1 damage to a fly replaced is working. This is a bug. Distributing the damage over any number of maggots or flies in the same row is something we can test out. So I need a spell that does more than 1 damage. So actually have all of these showing cards that don't work yet because they're not implemented yet in the market here. So let's add Spell name, Wildfire Whip. And instead of Slaughter, let's just put Bleed Static. And we'll let more targets come to play from Banesire. And this does 4 damage. This should be able to kill all of these maggots at once. And it did. So one thing is that you may distribute the damage dealt. It isn't that you must. So that is something that we have to potentially look into. Obviously you don't want to have to decide, but it's potentially important in some strategical situations. Specifically that you might, when I have played Maggoth, it might be the case that you don't want to get rid of all of them on one row, but you want to leave one so that it doesn't like fill up the row, basically. Because if you're toggling back and forth between filling up a row, your worse things are happening. Gravehold's taking damage, so you want to like avoid over damaging necessarily. So I'm going to add a note here. Distributing damage across multiple maggots / flies should be optional. Okay. And the fly hatches is working. That part's working, and that part is working. So I think otherwise the Nemesis rules are working. We can try the increased difficulty. Go up to expert mode, and we should get a fly and a maggot instead of 2 maggots whenever the unleash happens. And that did in fact happen. All right, let's actually put back in. Isn't there an attack that unleashes twice? I want to get more unleashes. Unleash twice. Yeah, awaken. Let's get 3 unleashes with increased difficulty so we get more flies happening. Okay, we get this, and then we get the hatching. Yeah, so a lot of stuff happening here. So I'm allowed to hit this bottom one. And yeah, it just goes after the ones in the top, doesn't it? I want I'm just curious, I want less damage. So I want 3 damage here. So Lava Tendril is 3. I want to see if I'm given a decision about splitting the damage, right? So if I hit this, click a Nemesis or minion to assign the damage, 3 left. But there. Yes, this is giving me choices of. I targeted the 1 though, so it shouldn't be giving me this decision with 3 left, and it's also not. Maybe I don't have the logic there to be returning them. There might be something that Carapace Queen had here that I didn't include. Yeah, find damage target views. Needs to return those. think. What's controlling this? Oh, I see. This part needs to update those. I guess I've got. Let's just do this. Yeah, basically this is, we need to tell the rest of the UI where these targets are. Actually, that might be why we're allowed to target those other things. But let's see. I think I can continue the game from here, actually. Oh yeah, it's still letting me target those. But now if I hit one of these, I can choose between those. Oh yeah, it's actually, the animation is a little funny. It changes to an arrow because of the logic is not quite right there. So that worked. It made me click more than I want, right? Like I already targeted this one. So I don't expect to have to click it again. Yeah, I think we might have to talk to game designers about exactly how the distribution works there. But yeah, that part worked. Let's fix that weird arrow showing up. That was this. Yeah, I mean, it's showing it, but without... If the target life is 0, don't show it, right? What if I do this? I think that might be what we want. Yeah, it just goes away. Oh, interesting. It did not allow me to kill this one. I mean, it ends up being the same, right? There's no real difference in what you do there, is there? So, like, if I target this, I have to have one fly left. There's no other outcome, right? Unless you can deal less damage, but I don't think you get to deal less damage. You think you... Well, it says any number, right? So do you get to decide to deal less damage? I'm not sure. I don't think you can have a different outcome. Can you? I guess if there's more, right? If there was 3 flies here and I'm doing 3 damage, I could end up with different results in different ways. So there are different things that could happen, but I'm not sure exactly how exactly everything works there. So can you deal less damage than, like, can you damage fewer? how about this? Do you have to distribute the full amount of damage? So, it's a question. All right, so yeah. So that seems generally functional, but maybe a couple of quirks to deal with there. Some visual polish and stuff and sprites, but it's generally functional, so that's nice. So maybe before we wrap up, we can check out the couple of cards that David implemented. Fly Throng and Vile Breeder. So if we put it as a stacked card, let's turn off continue game. Then it's going to play Fly Throng. Place 3 maggots into play. Any player suffers 3 damage. We don't have the right sprites there, so that's fine. And I can actually give myself some extra ether on my turn, and we can make sure the discard part works in the UI, but that should. Don't have too much to worry about that. Oh, right. Lava Tendril. If I get an ether, then I can discard that. Cool. So if I actually, in the debug settings, if I set that as an initial card, it will also reduce the power tokens immediately. So it will go off right away. So place 3 maggots into play. That happens. That also hit Gravehold and Hatch to Fly as part of that. And 3 damage. Pick a character. There you go. All right, so that worked fine. We can check that off. And the other card was Vile Breeder. And same thing, if we put it as an initial card, its persistent effect will happen. So persistent, place a maggot into play, and so that happened. And any player suffers 2 damage. Pretty straightforward. I think that is good too. So we'll carry on with that. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good session of Maggoth integration. You can see some of the things we do with making that special Nemesis area. We didn't quite finish everything, but we got a lot of functionality put together for that. And next time, we'll be working with Jennifer to make that look much better and get the graphics put together, maybe get some of those icons in place, various bits and bobs to make it look very nice, and maybe potentially get to maybe a special visual effect. I'm not sure what we'll do yet, but probably something creepy crawly because, maggots and flies, they're going to be creepy crawly. So that is going to do it for the initial Aeon Zen New Age dev stream. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to check out the Kickstarter, which you can get at this link. We are cruising along. Hope to get that funded soon and be able to, continue working on this new content for you. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Thanks, Frenzy, and thanks everyone who tuned in and future viewers on YouTube. Have a good one. We'll see you later.